Heavy Podcast, hosted by Craig Gonzalez. What's up, guys? Welcome to Get Heavy Podcast. Another beautiful evening. I got an awesome guest on, Noah Levine, author of Dharma Punx, a massive figure in the punk rock world, started Refuge Recovery, all sorts of recovery programs for drugs and alcohol, all with the tenets of Buddhism and meditation and getting healthy. It was an amazing talk, very interesting guy, a lot of incredible perspective. So stay tuned for that. Having said all that, today's podcast is sponsored by Salzer's Records, 5777 Valentine Road. For 50 plus years, they have been providing all of your record, music, gift shop, pipe shop, adult shop needs. Check them out, 11 to 7 daily, right here off Victoria. I can't say enough about the fucking store itself. You guys have heard it before. I met my wife. I met all of my friends there. That store for 50 plus years has been providing everything you need to be awesome. You like used vinyl, you like new vinyl, you like tapes, records, all sorts of shit. Gift shop upstairs. We got the pipe shop for all you little fucking dab freaks. We got the adult shop for all you little normal freaks. Check that out. Go across the street and check out the last video store on earth, Salzer's Video. Shit that you can't find on YouTube. Everything there, man. Salzer's Records, check it out. Also, rate, subscribe, review, tell your fucking friends about this podcast. Hit that notifications bell on the YouTube. Please help spread the word. I'm so grateful at all the awesome positivity and feedback I've been getting for this thing. Much appreciated. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/getheavypodcast. All these episodes go up a week early. For $1 a month, you can get early access, bonus content, all sorts of shit like that. And finally, check out the merchandise, localshop.com/getheavypodcast for all of your Get Heavy merchandise. Enjoy the episode. Yeah. Well, hey, man, it's a pleasure to meet you, dude. I mean, I've been a big fan. I'm a friend of Eric, you know what I mean, and all that, and you know, read your book many years ago, you know. But
cool, yeah, happy to get on and have a chat.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Anyway, but yeah, as long as you can hear me fine, I'm good on my end. I can hear you.
How's my light? Is it okay?
Yeah, it looks great, dude. It's reflecting off of your beautiful head.
My bald dome.
Yeah. Anyway, well, cool, man. So this is like, you know, I'm not like an interview guy, just like a good conversation. Obviously, I'd love to talk to you about the books and all that stuff. You know what I mean? And I got many random thoughts and questions, but I wanted to start with at least, you know, we're rolling. So I wanted to say that it is a pleasure to meet you. I've been a big fan of your work for a long time. I'm not a sober guy, but I still appreciate it, you know, as far as the Buddhism and all the meditation and stuff. But I wanted to just kind of say that your book had the Dharma Punx. I read it when I was young, you know, probably maybe a couple of years after it came out, but it had such a profound effect on me in a way that maybe, I don't know if you're used to hearing or not, but, you know, as far as like, I wasn't a crazy partier. I didn't do anything. I actually grew up like, religious, like very Christian. I was involved like from 13 to maybe 16 with the Jesus like punk shit, you know what I mean? Like all that stuff. Like I was heavily involved in like religion and punk rock and stuff, and I played in bands and all that stuff, you know what I mean? And as I got older, obviously realizing the absolute glaring hypocrisies about Christianity, you know, and I got some pussy, you know, stuff just stopped making sense, right? But I remember reading your book, and it was at a time in my life where I had such an insane void in my life for spirituality. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Totally.
Because I did miss about the things about religion, about spirituality, about community. I missed that the ability to trust in something besides yourself, the ability, you know, all these things. And so I remember when I read your book, like I was already, I didn't drink or do a lot of things, but it hit me in a profound way just through the spiritual side, right? Like obviously the practice of meditation, but being able to at least meditate or pray on something that wasn't, you know, the Christian God. Like it hit me in a weird way. Like I don't know if you've ever had anyone say that kind of like that angle at you before.
No, I have heard that a little bit.
Okay, that's,
you know, I've also
yeah.
heard, I've also heard from a lot of people who like, you know, they were like, I really loved the first half of that book. You know, when you were like drugs and violence, like that was cool.
Right.
And then you got like into meditation and got sober, and you lost me.
Yeah, that's, I could see that too. They wanted it to be a Gigi Allen memoir, right, or something.
No, but I appreciate that. And, you know, after Dharma Punx, I created Against the Stream, and I really intentionally created Against the Stream, the book, and then the meditation centers, and because I didn't want it to be a recovery thing, because I wanted everyone to be welcome, and because I wanted, you know, our generation or whoever was interested, whether they were in recovery like me or not, to have access to this non-theistic way of like being a good person, and seeing it as a form of rebellion, that actually being an asshole is easy and normal, but being kind and compassionate, that's
Right.
fucking radical.
Totally, man. Yeah. And it's so interesting because when I read your book, those tenets were built into me through Christianity, because the place that I went to was a kind place. It was accepting. It was radical punkers, and, you know, it broke a lot of the norms, right? And like the idea of being a revolutionary through Jesus wasn't a foreign fucking idea, right? You know, if you break it down, like Jesus was a punk, he went against the thing, all these things, right? But as I grew older and rejected the idea of traditional religion, it broke my whole world into this fucking space where I was lost, dude. You know what I mean? And not that your book saved my life, but it fucking hit me in a profound way where I thought, like, there is another way to view spirituality in like a way that I wouldn't allow myself after I left after the Christian religion. You know what I mean? Like it was so interesting to me. You know what I mean?
You know, I think that it's one of the problems with religion, and you know, we could easily critique Buddhism as a religion too.
Yeah.
Where because of the corruption and, you know, ignorance and dogma that gets created into the religion, whether we're talking about Judaism or Christianity or Islam or Buddhism, people then get traumatized by it and disillusioned by it, and end up walking away from the good parts.
Right.
You know, I fucking get it, because I've been pretty close at times to being so disillusioned with the Buddhists that I'm like, the fuck am I doing?
Really?
Because these people are so full of shit, and, you know, it's another religion, you know, and in America it's become this sort of like monetized, you know, like how are we going to open more meditation centers rather than how are we going to be of service, and how are we going to actually teach these transformative practical skills to people. Because, you know, ultimately maybe Buddhism isn't supposed to be a religion. You know, there's no creation myth. It's not theistic. It's much more like humanist psychology. But people fuck everything up, and they even turn a non-theistic humanist psychology into a religion, and they start praying to statues, and you know, and it's just like, that has nothing to do with what the dude was teaching us.
Yeah. Right.
And I'd imagine, I don't know Christianity that well, but I imagine it's not that different than how they fucked up Jesus's message.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's what, like, when I grew up in the church I grew up in, and it was I came from a family of like chaos. Like, well, you actually came from I know your history, but I came from a family of drug addicts and bikers and fucking gnarly motherfuckers. And my actual rebellion was to go, nah, I don't want to do any of that, dude. You know what I mean? So I didn't go straight edge. I didn't do any of that, but I did find this community, you know what I mean, that just happened to fucking, you know, believe these things, and we did shows and all kinds of awesome shit, you know what I mean? But
was that connected with Jay Baker at all?
I don't know. It was like Officer Negative. I don't know, the JCHC kind of stuff. It was back in the mid late 90s.
in 2003, when Dharma Punx came out,
Mm-hmm.
um, Jay Baker, who's the son of Jim Baker and Tammy Faye Baker's, it's their
Oh,
kid, and
okay.
he was a punker,
Okay.
maybe more of a Nirvana punker than a Sex
Yes.
Pistols punker, but whatever, like
Yeah.
and he started a like Christian punk rock ministry.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was anything to do with that. Like it was a lot of people that were like righteous, decent humans. My youth pastor is still a fucking amazing guy and does a lot of kind shit. But the tenets were always in kindness and servitude and serving. And that's what I found appealing about punk rock because it has the same. When you do it right, it has the same tenets, right? But when you get into the deep religious discussion of like you said, how bad people can ruin a great message, because the tenets of Buddhism are probably modeled off the tenets of Jesus are probably modeled off the same tenets of Buddhism. You know what I mean? Be kind to people, be fucking there. So it's like I had these things built into my life, which was cool. So when I read Dharma Punx, and obviously, you get, obviously that shit saved your life, much like early religion saved mine. But when I walked away from it, I was just in a deep fucking void of not knowing who I was anymore. And it just made me realize, like, oh yeah, dude, like when I do pray, it is meditation, and I don't have to fucking pray to Jesus. I could pray to whatever, you know what I mean? Just and just breathing techniques and all these things. Like it hit all these parallels with me, and it really helped me like rebuild my identity as a savage sinner, or whatever we are now. Now that I walked away from Jesus, it was just very like, yeah, I don't know, man. It was so important
Yeah,
to
when
my life.
I was really hoping that Dharma Punx would, introduce my generation to Buddhism and mindfulness and all of that stuff in
Mm-hmm.
a way that was accessible. And I wasn't on a mission like a recovery mission, although my addiction was what led me to,
Mm-hmm.
practicing meditation. But I was just like, wow, this shit is so cool and it's so radical and it's so practical. I'd like to make this accessible to my subculture.
Right.
Um, and a lot of people in our subculture that come from that world, end up alcoholics and addicts, but not all of us, right? And
Right.
we're all seeking freedom, and we're all aware that there's something drastically wrong with this world that needs to be rebelled against.
Right.
But how do we channel that rebellion?
Yeah. How do you channel it? Well, and not only that, how do you channel it without destroying yourself?
Yeah,
Right. I mean, that's the number one. It's most of the time you fucking destroy yourself and you think you're fighting the system. You know what I mean? When really the way to fight this system, the way to fight this world is to be the best you can be. You know what I mean? Be a positive outlet, change people's, you know what I mean, perception of what is a good human. You know what I mean? Whether you got
100%.
tattoos or fucking whatever,
100%.
Yeah.
And that's been really fun for me, to show up wherever I'm showing up, looking the way that I look. And probably what I've been told more than anything else is like, oh, you surprised me. I was at a recovery meeting the other night and somebody was like, wow, like I saw you and I thought you were intimidating. And then you like had this beautiful message of forgiveness and compassion and recovery. And
Right.
like that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, are you still, does it still happen a lot where I mean, I don't know anything about, Buddhism and the practice that much. I mean, but are people are still shocked by you, right? Like tattoo guy, fucking, I mean, cause I get very little questions about my tattoos anymore. You know what I mean? The culture is now kids get tattoos on their fucking face first, then their hands,
Right.
where when we started getting them, it was actually terrifying still to get them.
It depends on the circle. I still sometimes walk in these sort of conservative upper middle class, Buddhist circles where people are like, ooh, holding their purses, because
Right. Yeah.
the thugs have entered the room.
Does the punk in you get excited when it happens? Because it does for me.
I love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
yeah. I mean, I love that. It is funny. I mean, I used to tour a lot and play music, in metal bands and punk bands and stuff. And man, there was like for me nothing like walking into a small store in a small town in the middle of the country, and the record just goes and skips, and everyone's like, huh? You know what I mean? And I remember one time I was in a McDonald's. It was like the only place in the town. and there was maybe 30 people in line, and we just rolled out of a van, smelling like shit. We're in the middle of a 5-week tour, in the middle of Iowa. And I walk in, dude, and the whole restaurant just looks at me. And I was like, okay. So I just put my arms up and I went like a monster. And then I cut the line and ordered food. You know what I mean? Everyone's like holding their kids, you know what I mean? But it is funny to me that people still view it as like, oh my God,
Yeah, when we're hanging around our people who are, generally tattooed and whatever,
yeah,
you don't notice it. But when you're in the middle of America, or like sometimes even in Los Angeles or wherever I don't even notice it. But my girlfriend will notice it. She'll be like, people trip out on you.
Yeah.
And they wait till you're not looking, but they're like looking at your head tattoos, like people trip out on you. And I'm like oblivious.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's not, for you, it's not a big deal. For me, it's not a fucking big deal, but it is always hilarious because you've operated in this world that is, it's either, when I thought of Buddhism, when I thought of meditation before, immediately the biker kid in me is like, this is hippie dippy shit, dude. And I don't, you know what I mean? What are we praying to nature over here? You know what I mean? And over the years, Eric and me have talked many, many times about meditation. He's been telling me for years that I need to get into it, but I've always told him, like, look, man, my anger keeps me sharp. You know what I mean? Like, I can't afford to not be fucking pissed, right? I've survived this long by being seriously fucking on edge. You know what I mean? And I had to admit to him when I had him on the pod, I'm totally wrong, dude. You know what I mean? Like, I'm totally fucking wrong. And I have started meditating, and, I don't get to it as much as I should. But, I wanted to ask, like, how have you, over the years, you still deal with anger, right? I mean, how do you, like, how do you break that cycle in your mind of like, this is what keeps me unique, this is what keeps me fucking sharp, to let down those walls enough? Is it just over time?
My anger created so much suffering for me.
Okay.
That, didn't keep me sharp. It kept me getting locked up.
Right.
Right. The consequences, that led to the addiction that, then even after in recovery, the, straight edge, I'm, gonna kick your ass because you're drinking a beer bullshit that I went through.
Oh, okay.
It just created too much suffering for me. And because I was practicing meditation, and I just saw like, oh, this is not protecting me. This is not making me powerful. This is just causing suffering in my life. And I actually truly want to be happy. I actually want to be free from suffering.
Right.
And although anger, I think, is a pretty natural emotion and response, and maybe especially for men, who are kind of like, that's the only emotion we're allowed to feel. It's, it's okay to be pissed. You can't be vulnerable. You can't be sad. You can be mad. I just started to see through it and see that, like, it doesn't serve me.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about,
I've gone through a lot of shit the last couple of years, and my mind, some big betrayals, some big losses, some major, and my mind will still say, like, you should really be mad. And there's a whole list of people that my mind believes I should be mad at.
Yeah.
But I don't believe my mind.
Oh, okay.
Whatever that means. Whatever that means, right? Like, whatever that means. Like, it doesn't stop my mind from giving me bad advice and be like, you should hate them and you should be mad at them and, all of this. And my mind still does that. I think we're just wired in that sort of defensive, survival instinct. But because of meditation, I don't believe my mind a lot of that. I have a healthy sense of skepticism towards my own views and opinions.
Right. So it's about creating that space between the moment and the reaction, right? I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense because, like when I say my anger, I'm not an angry dude. Like, I don't pick fights. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not out here screaming at my children. I don't do any of that. But I have a general sense of like, what the fuck's going on? You know what I mean? Like, and that's always in my head. And I'm like terrified to lose that. You know what I mean? Like my sense of awareness, my sense of surrounding, you know what I mean? And generally being like having a weird view on shit, because I grew up as a white trash kid in the desert that, I grew up around miners. Like my old man owned a gold mine when I was a kid. I grew up in like a weird, crazy fucking world, You know what I mean? And but when I think about shedding this anger, you know, it makes sense that it's that moment of when it pops in your head to create the space to react, right?
Well, and the more that I looked at my anger, my rage, my resentments, my fears, of starting to see that like there's actually something underneath. When
Yeah.
I'm angry, it's actually because I'm hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually because I'm trying to avoid feeling vulnerable, feeling you know, like something else, some sadness, some grief, some pain, and that the anger is just covering it.
Right.
You know, it's like, even though the example of like we're in traffic and someone cuts you off and you're like, fuck you. And it's like, what really happened there is I was afraid. And right. And rather than just being like, ooh, that was scary, it's like rage at how dare you make me feel insecure.
Right.
And I'm mad at you about it. When really, like, all that's happening is, oh, I like felt afraid.
I got scared for a second. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And it's I'm feeling the primary emotion rather than that covering everything in anger.
Now, is there a Buddhist definition for anger? Like what it is? I mean, is it just all suffering, right? Is that?
Oh, I don't know, like definition, but this perspective that I'm sharing is kind of a, you know, there's an encouragement to not indulge in it. There's an awareness that it's a natural, instinctual thing, but that it's covering a more primary emotion. I mean, we would define it as an afflictive emotion, but even enlightenment doesn't get rid of afflictive emotions. It just changes our relationship to the afflictive emotions.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, because I've been kind of studying up, you know, and reading a lot of stuff about, you know, suffering, right? When they talk about suffering, like, what does anger create? Suffering. What is suffering? You know what I mean? The definition of suffering is a million things, right?
You know, there's one like kind of famous Buddhist quote where the Buddha said, you know, acting out of anger is like picking up a burning ember from the fire to throw at your enemy. And it's like, yeah, sure, you can like get mad, you know, but first you're burning the shit out of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Which actually kind of tracks in my mind. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, that makes it take a hit. You know, yeah, it's just so funny because it's something over the last 3 or 4 years, you know what I mean? Like shedding this punk rock fucking, you know, the way I grew up and the way all these things, it's been such an insane challenge, you know, and it's been great, you know, because I'm a different human than I was before, you know what I mean? And I think a part of that is growing up and being a father, right? I mean, your kids, I mean, if you want to crash course in fucking patience, have some kids, right? I mean, whew, it's brutal. Do you have children?
I do. I have 2 kids, and you know, especially if we want to not pass on our neurotic bullshit to our kids, then we really have to slow down and be like, okay, I want to teach these kids kindness and compassion and friendliness, and you know, how to work with their difficult emotions rather than just run from them. And
yeah, it's a trip. I mean, I actively try to not push my bullshit on my children, and you know, they're unique, they're exciting, they're fucking creative, you know what I mean, all these things, and I try so hard not to crush it. You know what I mean? Like all the time. You know what I mean? Just don't crush their fucking whole thing. You know what I mean? It's such a wild yeah, parenthood is brutal, dude. I mean, it's, you know, I've always said it's if you have a kid, it's basically a mini version of you with all of your worst attributes. Right? I mean, at times. Yeah. you're like staring at a tiny version of yourself, you know. You're like, "Holy shit, man. Yeah, that's my rage." Oh, all right, got it. Yeah, you're throwing a straight up tantrum, you know. But I wanted to see, like, you know, when you talk like, you know, as I've gotten into Buddhism and, you know, and meditation and all this stuff, like they talk about being present, right? And I understand what being present is like when you're actually meditating, right? But what does it mean when you're in the moment? Like how do you break that down in your mind?
I mean, defining it as present time awareness, which applies to whatever we're doing whenever we're doing it. And it's so much easier said than done because our minds are built to worry about the future and plan for the future and fantasize about the future. Part of our survival instinct is, don't, you know, if you're generally sort of safe and comfortable or whatever now, don't be here. be craving for what's next, be worried about what's next, be in the planning process. The mind does that all by itself. Or in the past, kind of either whether reminiscing about the good old days or resenting whoever has injured us in the past or worrying about the world's situation. So being present sounds quite easy. Like, be here when you're walking, be present with your footsteps. When you're driving, be present with, the surroundings. But the reality is, that's not how we're, like when you're the example of like when you're cooking dinner, you're thinking about eating dinner. When you're eating dinner, you're thinking about doing the dishes. When you're doing the dishes, you're thinking about dessert. So mindfulness is when you're cooking dinner, like, I'm fully present here cooking dinner. And now I'm fully present here eating and tasting my food. And now I'm fully here washing the dishes. And I'm bringing my attention back to the task that I'm doing. Whether it's, and it's easier when you're surfing and you're like, well, this is killer. I love being present surfing because I'm like feeling it and I'm totally here. Or, but in the mundane activities, it's more difficult.
Right.
When you're at work and when you're, kind of doing stuck in traffic of like, oh, this is a opportunity for presence as well. Present time, awareness, and mindfulness also is kind of not only what's happening, but is it perceived as pleasant or unpleasant or neutral? And putting a lot of investigation into, how do I react when it's a little bit unpleasant? How quickly does my mind dissociate, go to the future, go to the past? How quickly do I look for something pleasant to do when I'm bored, when I'm, just washing the dishes and, going into some fantasy, rather than just like, well, this is pretty unpleasant or neutral or whatever I'm doing, but I'm fully here for it. Because ultimately, mindfulness and presence is about learning to have compassion for pain. And by turning towards, so much of our life is unpleasant or neutral, unpleasant sounds, smells, tastes. Mindfulness is turning towards that and saying like, okay, there's this habitual reactive aversion towards unpleasantness, and that creates suffering and stress in my life. But if I bring mindfulness to the unpleasant and accept it and meet it with friendliness and mercy and compassion, then there's no suffering. It's just an unpleasant, it's just another porta potty at the fucking, things. You're like, yeah, it's unpleasant. It smells, but I don't have to suffer about it.
Yeah, that makes sense, dude. I mean, because it's weird. The only thing I could liken it to, really, I mean, obviously, we all have these moments where, if you are doing something great with your kids, you're watching them do something, you're just proud of them. But, playing music, obviously, you have to be present, right? And the only thing is the task that you're doing, and what I do for work is I run heavy equipment, like bulldozers and blades and shit like that. I actually teach how to run that stuff now. And I say this all the time, and as you were just describing that, I realize that I tell this to people all the time because there's a few pieces of equipment, most of them, that you can only be present on. You cannot be distracted by anything going on besides what the task is that you're doing. You know what I mean? And it's like, and those are the few pieces of equipment that I love to run: a blade, a dozer, all these things. You know what I mean? Like, because it is so much focused on the task and getting the task done and being present for that task to make sure you grind a road to this thickness so you can fucking pave it. You know what I mean? Like, and it makes sense, if we all step back in those simple moments that we realize are being present and try to extrapolate it, it makes sense,
But it's like, yes, there are those certain experiences, the music, the heavy machinery, that force us to concentrate and be present. But bringing that same quality, because like driving a car or something, like when you're learning to drive a car, you better be fucking present.
Right.
Pen and cue and shifting gears and checking your mirrors. But then after a while, you can fucking be in La La Land and still get to your destination, not present at all. And all of a sudden you're there and you miss the whole ride.
Right. Yeah. And which has happened many, many times.
Which I'm sure happens with heavy equipment too.
It can, right? But like it definitely can. But there are a few pieces where there is no room for not. You know what I mean? Like, and those are the harder pieces to run, right? These are the hardest pieces of equipment to master. They're the hardest fucking pieces of equipment to ever get down because you cannot run like your brain cannot run away from you. You know what I mean? Like it makes sense. You know what I mean? It's yeah.
You're gonna fuck it up.
You're definitely gonna fuck something up. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a trip. And I would, when you talk about suffering a lot, you know what I mean, and all this stuff, and I want to know, like, I have family members that have done their fair share of addiction and rehabs and all this stuff, and it just, the one through line in what I see happening a lot of time, and I, like I said, I drink a little bit. I don't party my ass off or nothing like that. I don't think I don't have the alcohol or drug bug. You know what I mean? I can walk away from that shit, but I have family members that cannot, right? But the one major through line that I see when you talk about suffering is the person's inability to not take ownership of their own actions, which cause suffering. I mean, is that a huge part of it?
Yeah, I mean, suffering is greed, right? It's craving, and suffering is hatred and aversion, a lack of acceptance of the unpleasant. And suffering is also ignorance. And so I would put that lack of taking responsibility and agency as ignorance, right? Of not understanding that actually we are responsible and we do have the ability to stop drinking and using and acting in ways that are causing harm to ourselves and others, that we're not actually powerless, and this is where Buddhism is much different than like a 12-step recovery model that says, like, humans are powerless and only God can, restore
Right.
you to sanity, and you have to, petition this fictitious God. And Buddhism is like, no fucking way. Actually, you have the power to do it. Even if you feel hopeless, even if you feel, that's just confusion. The reality is human beings have the ability to practice renunciation, to stop doing the things that are causing harm to us and others.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to wake up to that. And that was a huge part of my waking up. It was that I took responsibility and I was like, I got myself into this mess.
Right.
And I got myself into this mess. And yes, I'm addicted to drugs and I'm addicted to alcohol, but I can, one moment at a time, choose to not obey my mind and my cravings when it's telling me to drink.
Right.
That's actually something that I can defy. And speaking of rebellion, like, there's nothing more rebellious than telling your mind to shut the fuck up. I'm not going to do what you tell me.
Right. Yeah, totally, man. Yeah, it
You're
makes
giving
sense.
bad advice again.
Right. Yeah. How many times has your brain been correct so far? Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense, but I wonder, like, there are people obviously that do get sober. They do the work, right? They stay sober, but they just never seem to take the steps to admitting that they're the ones that got themselves there, right? I mean, it's so odd to me because I deal with it in my family constantly, with certain people and stuff, and it's like, dude, it's always a blame game, you know what I mean? And it's like, well, dude, and it wasn't until we really all stepped back and said, you're on your fucking own, you know what I mean? Until they got serious and started figuring this thing out, you know what I mean? And it's just, I'm always shocked at, because I've always been a big guy in taking ownership of my faults. If I fuck up, I apologize. I admit it. Hey man, I completely tanked this. My bad. How can we fix this? How can we go from there? These things are built into my brain, you know what I mean? But when you meet people that just cannot see it, you know what I mean? I'm always like, how do you get through that, man? You know what I mean? It's just,
there are a lot of functions in both refuge recovery and in 12-step recovery where we do a lot of inventories and we look at our part. And in the 12 steps there's the daily 10th step where we're supposed to reflect on anything that any harm we caused, anything we did unskillfully today. Likewise in refuge, through mindfulness of looking at our lives and then taking responsibility and making amends. Now,
right.
because some people skip that. They skip that step, that part, and they never quite get there.
Yeah, it's a trip, man. I've never. It's such a wild thing to do because it's one of the main things that it bugs the living shit out of me. It's when you talk to someone and they're just, oh well, he did this and that, and it's like, man, so much of this world would be better by taking ownership of your bad part in it and saying, yeah, man, you know what? I pissed you off because blah 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 or whatever, you know, and taking ownership of it rather than just pushing the blame. And I think I don't know how much of it's society, I don't know how much of it's built into the human DNA. You know what I mean? It's hard to manage, you know.
Probably a bit of both. I feel like all of society comes out of the human DNA, right? All of the greed, hatred, and oppression in this world comes from, you know, a human survival instinct gone awry. And you know what has helped me, I think, most with this is coming to understand karma, that I'm totally responsible for all of my actions, and that my intentions are important, and that taking responsibility for my intentional actions is everything. And that people that don't understand karma, you know, blaming everyone else and not taking responsibility for their part and their intentions, and you know, are miserable, like you said, are suffering.
Yeah, it's so it is crazy. But are you a guy that believes that, you know, like you know, obviously humans are all coming from a very specific line of DA many millions and millions of years ago. I mean, a lot of this stuff is built into us. We used to run from fucking, you know, animals trying to kill us all day, right? So I think one of the radical things about Buddhism was this is a guy saying, what, 2,500 years ago, hey guys, you know what I mean? Like, there's a way to combat this, like, years of evolutionary terror, you know what I mean, that we've experienced. You know, it's such a trip that you can, like, you know, what, he couldn't have been the first guy to ever do it. I mean, how does it track back like that? I mean, is it involved with like evolutionary like thought?
I don't know. I don't think that he knew about evolutionary biology.
Well, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
what he did was he looked at his mind, and he was like, okay, there's all of this craving for pleasure, aversion to pain, self-centeredness, and it causes all of this unhappiness. So what if I didn't take everything so personally? What if I practiced non-attachment rather than clinging and craving? What if I practiced compassion instead of hatred? And as it turned out, he's like, oh, there's practical results to this. And then now we know from evolutionary biology that what he was doing, and he said, oh, this goes against the human norm, because against the stream. The human norm from millions of years of evolving and survival instinct biology is craving and hatred and self-centeredness, right? It's not anybody's fault. It's just what we're born into. It's how we have, you know, evolved as a species. And just what you're saying, he found out, wow, there's a way to relate to our minds. There's a way to relate to pleasure and pain and self in a way that minimizes suffering and eradicates the unnecessary levels of unhappiness that the mind creates for us. The untrained mind is untrustworthy. But through meditation, through study, through renunciation, we can train our mind into where it becomes an ally and becomes wisdom rather than fueled by evolutionary ignorance.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. So you think it was all an internal war with him at first that got him to
personal. It was very just kind of looking at his own, you know, human condition, and then seeing like this is the universal human condition, and that kind of you know, what I was trying to do in Dharma Punx, which is that core message, which is like, if I can do this, anybody can do this, which was the Buddha's message, which is like, I'm not special. I'm not a god. I'm just a dude who is looking at my mind and seeing the truth about my mind. And now I'm changing my relationship to it. Now I'm not suffering about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and how much, so when meditation comes into it, right? I mean, obviously the breath, are you into like different types of breath work for different situations? Or do you do the same kind of meditation mantra kind of stuff at all? I mean, how deep into the meditation side have you got into this stuff?
You know, I keep it somewhat simple in mindfulness, which is mindfulness of the breath and body, mindfulness of the feeling tones, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, mindfulness of the mind states and emotions. And so, you know, this is the Buddhist teaching of mindfulness. So there's breath work, there's breath awareness, but it's not about manipulating the breath to create an experience. It's about the breath is something that's reliable refuge because it's always happening. If you're alive, you're breathing. So it's a good place to place your attention.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the breath work shit that happens now is about hyperventilating. It's about creating this sort of like, hey, if you breathe this way, it'll feel killer. And it's more chasing pleasure, right? It's more trying to avoid what's happening emotionally by replacing it with a meditative state. The Buddha's teachings on meditation were like, hey, don't try to get rid of it. Learn to live with it. Learn to have intimacy with your own mind and your emotions. Learn not to take it so personal. A lot of meditation techniques are actually avoidance techniques. Buddhist meditation, as originally taught, is not avoiding it, but turning towards it. A lot of those cool sound baths and, kind of breath work, whatever, like they're fun. They get you high. They put you to sleep. They let you avoid what's causing suffering in your life temporarily. Buddhist mindfulness says, hey, stop avoiding, turn towards it, see it, feel it. Then you can heal it. Then you can get free from it. Not from some fucking cool, transcendental meditation bullshit, but through embodied turning towards it and feeling it.
Right. So how much do you know much about like Wim Hof and all that stuff, like the Iceman? Do you think all that shit's just like you're fucking over it, like transcendental meditation, all that stuff? I mean, how do you feel about that kind of stuff?
I feel like, there's lots of different kinds of meditation, and it depends on why you're meditating. Most people aren't meditating to get free from suffering. They're just looking for something that gives them a temporary fix. So the Wim Hof stuff, super cool. TM, super cool. If what you're looking for is just like a stress reduction kind of technique. If you're looking for awakening, they're not going to work. Those techniques aren't going to take you to compassion, towards understanding emptiness. They're not going to take you all the way. Most people aren't looking for liberation. They're just like, oh, cool, this meditation helps me not be so stressed out, gives, kind of calms my nervous system. That's great too. I'm just one of those guys who's like, no, I want the real deal. I want the shit that has the potential to change my whole life, not just get me high on an ice bath.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so, because I love Wim Hof, right? I mean, it's and it is. I mean, first I'm shocked that more people don't understand that, like, anxiety, all the, when people have panic attacks and all that stuff, like 90% of it is because of lack of breath, right? I mean, it feels like it. I mean, it could be your mind just freaking out, but there are, if you're in the middle of a panic attack and you just take some deep breaths and breathe, you know what I mean? I feel like it's your body's reaction to just, you're not breathing enough. I don't think most of us breathe enough. You know what I mean? How many of us have shallow breath all day long? You don't, like, when you take a full breath, everyone's like, whoa, you know what I mean? You realize, and it's just the stress and the grind, but when Wim Hof stuff, the part that I think is so cool is that it is scientifically proven to help get your fucking immune system moving and all these things, you know what I mean? And it's fucking rad, but I see what you're saying, it is a temporary, maybe it's a stepping stone, but when you're really trying to decipher your own mind, right? It's a battle of the mind with Buddhism and the meditation practices there, right? Essentially. Whereas he's in a battle with fucking body, it feels like, and maybe it helps the mind, but different worlds.
I'm sure it does. And again, I think that, like, it's so cool that there's so many people in our culture now practicing the sort of secular mindfulness or the breathing techniques or the sound baths or whatever it is that's like a doorway. It's so cool. Like, I'm a hater. For sure, I'm a hater, and I'm so biased. And, I can talk tons of shit about it. But I also have this side that's like, oh no, like, that's fucking great. Like, anything that's getting people to sit down and shut up and do some meditation, cool. Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah, well, that makes sense because, when you think about, like, punk rock guilt, right? I don't know if you've ever dealt with that, but when you see it all the time, it's like, you're not allowed to like any band that sells out or fucking any of that shit, you know what I mean? It took me years to, like, shed that, you know what I mean? Like, just to generally be happy if you've done anything you've wanted to do and been passionate about it and you got successful, fucking congratulations, right? But I've always said that, I mean, punk rock guilt is probably harder than Catholic guilt. You know what I mean? Like, to shed that shit is brutal. You know what I mean? Like, Catholic guilt's fine, whatever, but punk rock guilt, fuck, good luck. You know what I mean? And it makes sense. You know what I mean? If anything that gets the ball rolling, you know what I mean? Like, because I've tried all these things. I've float tanks. I've done all this cool shit, and it is fucking cool, right? But it never sticks. It never fucking sticks. And then, first of all, who can afford a float tank or to even go to one? You know what I mean? All these things. And when I started doing, you know, a lot of the meditation, you know, just using I like Sam Harris's app. I use Calm, all that stuff. And it is just the basic noticing your breath, noticing feelings, you know, working from your head to your toes. And it's so consistent and so fucking easy and has such a better overall effect in the long term, you know what I mean, than all these like hot spot fucking breathing methods and stuff, which I will say the Wim Hof breathing method, I guarantee fucking helped me beat COVID. You know, I was out there, I'm starting to feel it. My lungs are building up and I'm fucking I did that shit for 3 times a day for, 2 days and just felt it like leave my body, which is rad. But the consistency of just mindfulness and doing the meditation that I have been doing has made such a bigger overall impact in my life, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing with like all of the plant medicine and psychedelics, you know, where people are like trying to have this sort of transformative experience on an intoxicant, you know, that's giving you this sort of
the ayahuascas and all that.
Yeah. And it's like cool, like I'm sure it's helping some people. But also it's not giving you something that's practical that you can really integrate into a true transformation. It's opening the door in some way.
Sure.
But only I'm biased, but my sense is that only a true meditation practice is going to allow you to live into that experience. Like the float tank is awesome. I like to do it too. It's fun.
Oh, you have done it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. It's cool, man. It's fucking cool.
No, I love that shit. And the ice baths, like all of that shit. It's super fun. And I also like surfing and riding dirt bikes and skating. And like, I like doing intense shit, and I like, including the meditation stuff. But I explored it quite a bit. And like, there's nothing like a silent meditation retreat and just being with yourself, without special breathing techniques, without, anything all that fun. Learning to be bored, like that's real liberation, right?
Really?
Not, like doing the intense shit, like that's a little too easy. But doing the kind of, I'm just gonna sit here and then I'm gonna walk, and then I'm gonna sit and then I'm gonna walk. And just, my Dharma teacher, a Buddhist monk named Ajahn Amro, he said, look, if you wanna learn this, and be on this path, you gotta learn 3 things. Learn how to be bored, learn how to be lonely, and learn how to be hungry.
Wow.
And it's like, that's some real shit.
Dude,
not like,
honestly, you 2 of those things literally scare the shit out of me, dude. You know what I mean? Like, boredom. My wife calls me a shark because if I stop moving, I'm gonna die. You know what I mean? Like, and that's how I've been my whole life. I get antsy. I have to do something. I have to create something. I have to move. And to really, honestly, to sit at a silent retreat sounds terrifying to me. Like no words at all. It's crazy. I mean, that has to be a why.
I started doing silent retreats. In Dharma Punx, I write about it. Like I started doing silent retreats when I was like 19. And then all through my 20s and 30s and 40s, and I started with like a 3-day silent retreat, and then I did a 5-day, and then I did a 7-day, and then I did a whole bunch of 10 days. And then I did a couple months longs, and then I did a 90-day silent retreat.
God, it's giving me anxiety even thinking about it, dude.
It's a little bit like, like when I got into punk rock, like I wanted to know, like, what's the real punk? Okay, there's the Clash and the Pistols and the Ramones, and then there's the second wave with Black Flag and Circle Jerks, and and then there's like the street crust, like Crucifix and Exploited, and it's like, I want to know, like, where's the roots of this shit? I feel like the same way with meditation, and like the same way with drugs. Like once I smoked weed, I was like, this is great. What's heroin like?
Yeah, give me all the drugs. I need all this. Yeah.
Give me all the drugs.
Yeah, all the fucking drugs.
I want to smoke crack. And so, I have that intensity seeking, gene like you, and that kind of like activity. Shark, I like that. Like a shark, like you got to keep moving.
Oh yeah, my wife.
But I also
She's
have
all okay, shark.
the,
Fucking sit down, dude. I'm like, fuck, all right.
that's like the most intense is like, oh, I'm just going to learn how to be bored.
Oh my
I'm going to
god,
learn how
yeah.
to be hungry and not eat dinner. Like the monks don't
Mm-hmm.
eat dinner. Like my teacher who was saying that, like learn how to be hungry, hasn't had dinner in like 45 years.
God
They can
damn,
only eat until noon.
yeah.
And it's like, whoa, this is fucking cool.
Right.
Learning to defy the mind and
Mm-hmm.
be bored and be alone and lonely and horny and not satisfying any of it.
God, it's a fucking. That sounds terrifying, dude. I mean, and when you talk about hunger too, I mean, that's one of the ones that really gets me because I think of all the real addictions that are around, the one that I do have is food and eating. You know what I mean? And it has to be the hardest fucking thing. I mean, a heroin addict's fine, right? I mean, you can kick it, it's rough. But dude, so like I've always been a bigger guy. I lost 90 pounds a long time ago and slowly over the past 4 years have gained about 50 of it back. And now I'm at the point where I'm like fucking embarrassed, right? And I'm like, I've just, the food thing is the one fucking thing. I can walk away from beer, alcohol. I don't smoke pot anymore. For weeks, months, it doesn't fucking bother me. But the food is the one actual addiction I have, dude. And I cannot fucking, I just can't. There's a hump, dude. And I don't know if it's just trauma from being a kid. You know what I mean? I know the exact moment where I got fat. You know what I mean? And it's just, how do you deal with that shit? I mean, have you dealt with that stuff in your recovery programs?
Yeah, in Refuge Recovery, which is the program that I created that is a Buddhist-based recovery program, all addictions are treated. And so with, like you're saying, like with drugs and alcohol, with substance abstinence, with process addictions, food, sex, gambling, stuff like that, sometimes it's abstinence, like you can be celibate, you can give up gambling, you can, make bottom line behaviors around spending or money stuff. But with food, you can't stop eating.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to create your own bottom line. And often what people find is that it's the white powders, it's flour and sugar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that if people, in recovery from, that the core addiction around food is the sweets and the carbs, the flours and the rice and stuff like that. And so that people, find like, okay, if I make a bottom line behavior and I really practice renunciation, and it's just like the alcoholic who says, I can't drink a little bit. I can't eat a little bit of sugar, so I just renounce it. I live my life free from it. Because, those real, and it's harder, right? Because then it's so socially acceptable to be like, well, hey, it's my kid's birthday party. I better have a cupcake. And then all of a sudden I'm eating ice cream every day and I'm back on the fucking thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So what it is, it's so weird for me because what it is that I know the things. I know exactly what I need to fucking do. I lost 90 pounds on the keto diet, felt fucking great, right? But now what I realize is that if I have a few beers on Friday, I eat like shit Saturday. And then that spawns it into eating like shit on Sunday. Monday, I'm back into it, and I've stepped 2 times. So now I don't know if I'm drinking alcohol to fuck up my own diet subconsciously or if I'm actually addicted to alcohol once a week. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, it was a realization I had the other day. I was like, what is fucking going on? And I've really been considering just going completely sober, like from everything. You know what I mean? And it's fine. Like the sobriety of alcohol sounds fine, but when I look at my cycles, it starts with having a fucking few IPAs, right, at dinner or whatever. Because I could go and eat a salad, but then I'm like, hey, drink a few beers. You know what I mean? Get home, have some and it's this fucking cyclical weird move, dude. So I don't even know what I'm addicted to anymore.
I mean, it's one of the things. The Buddha's teaching was if you really want to use the mindfulness path, to abstain from alcohol. And it's exactly for this reason. Not because there's anything wrong with alcohol, but because when you put alcohol into your system, you're more likely to be heedless or unskillful around other behaviors, around your speech, around your sexuality, around food, And so Buddhism is a sober, kind of practice. There's nothing wrong with alcohol, but it blocks your mindfulness and it lowers your, inhibitions and renunciation. And so there is something to thinking about, and considering like, yeah, maybe I should just not drink and then I'll be more disciplined with what I consume.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, I tell myself for years, like, oh yeah, dude, I can walk away from booze, but then I don't, you know what I mean? Like, and then I'm more concerned about my health, my overall fucking health in life. Cause I got 3 kids. I'm going to be 39 years old. And I really want to spend my 40th birthday as a fucking healthy human. You know what I mean? Cause 13, 11 and 2. And now I got to be around, I was almost halfway done. Then we had this random surprise baby. And now, motherfucker, I'm in the mix. You know what I mean? I got to really get it, And so it's like, I've really been considering like just going completely sober. You know what I mean? And it's actually a pretty freeing thought as I get closer and closer. And I don't even know what I'm waiting for to start. I don't know why.
And you probably won't miss it much, since also because it's Fridays for you or whatever. And
whatever it is,
like
yeah.
Eric and me, and probably a lot of your bros are sober women that people. It's like when you cut that shit out of your life, you still go out with your friends on Friday or your family, and you enjoy the salad and you have more energy Saturday morning to go skate or surf or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And, it's actually a life upgrade to let go of a lot of the shit that we've been clinging to.
Yeah, and it's just so mindless. I don't know. For some reason, I have my birthday in mind, which is in August. But I'm like, why? Why am I even like why am I pushing it off? You know what I mean? But I think it's just because the reality of sitting with the hard questions of myself, really facing myself as a sober human for the first time since I didn't start smoking weed till I turned 21. I didn't drink till I turned 21. You know what I mean? Like, but I was a heavy pot smoker for many, many years, 10 blunts a day kind of guy. You know what I mean? I stopped smoking that because of work, and I didn't miss it at all. You know what I mean? But yeah, just the hard reality.
It's so much harder to give something up where there's not, to stop drinking when, like, I'm an alcoholic. I don't drink, right? Like, it's easier for me because I get locked up when I drink. Like, it destroys my life. It doesn't destroy your life.
No, it doesn't.
And it's, I don't know, even connected to like the Wim Hof stuff where I'm doing this, I'm doing it for health. Right. Mm-hmm. And that motivation of like, my motivation isn't even enlightenment or sobriety, but it's for health. It's like, in order to, be more careful with what I consume, alcohol is something that I don't consume.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It makes sense, dude. It makes sense. But I'm constantly asking myself the fucking question. And now it's like, now I'm starting to view it. I'm trying to switch my mind to it as a challenge, right? Because that's how I have to. I'm a deadline guy. I have to have a fucking challenge. I have to have someone saying, hey, you're a piece of shit. There's no way you're ever going to do this. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, oh, yeah, motherfucker. And now I'm off. You know what I mean? But it's like when it's your own mind, it's just a fucking different world, man. It's a trip. It's one of the harder things I've ever dealt with in my life is, addiction to food and wanting to be healthy and just not being able to do it. I felt like I've been able to manifest 99% of anything I've ever wanted to try. You know what I mean? Whether it's playing music.
One of the things, I read this in a study somewhere, and I've tried it with some people. I haven't honestly tried it myself, but where like if there's something that you really want to do, like a daily meditation practice, and you really want to do it, but you're not doing it, or like the food stuff of like, I really want to give up sugar and flour or whatever, but I'm not doing it. And I saw this study that it was, basically said, you're more likely to make a change that you want to make, but that you're not making, if you have some financial skin in the game.
Oh, okay.
And the way to do it is you say like, okay, I'm going to quit drinking, or I'm going to quit eating sugar or flour or whatever it is. And if I don't, I'm going to write this check. And it has to be an amount that's going to hurt, right? It can't be like, yeah, $200, I don't care. But $2,000, I do care. Right. And so I'm going to write this check, and I'm going to write it to an organization that I hate.
Okay.
And if I don't follow through with this commitment,
that's a good one, dude.
I've got to give money to them.
Yeah. I'm going to give it to the Bill O'Reilly Foundation.
Bill O'Reilly.
Whatever. I mean, check. Yeah. Give it to Trump. Yeah. Fuck it. Yeah, dude. Yeah. That actually makes sense, dude. That's a very good one.
And then you're like, well, fuck that. I'm not taking a drink. I'm not giving those motherfuckers money.
There you go, dude. That's a good motivator, man. That's fucking awesome. I'm going to try it. I'm going to write a check to something. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. But yeah, that's a great idea, man. It's amazing, man. But yeah, the hard reality of sitting with yourself is just, that's why when you say silence, learning to be hungry, all those things, I'm like, no way, dude. You know what I mean? But you know, you can do, obviously people come out of fucking death, you know.
Yeah, I mean, but it is, I mean, you can see even just in this conversation how the more we learn how to be bored and hungry and lonely on retreat, right, where it's sort of a controlled environment, and you know, you only can eat what's offered, and you learn to sit with hunger, then you build up that skill. And then, you know, when it's Friday night and your mind's saying like you should have a beer, you're like, I know how to not do that.
Yeah.
Or it's Saturday and your mind saying like we should get a pizza, and you know how not to do that because you've kind of trained your mind. You've walked through that experience of boredom and loneliness and hunger and survived.
Yeah. No, man, it's everything you're saying is 100% right. You know what I mean? It's hitting me in my brain. I got it. You know what I mean? Now I need you to call me tomorrow and call me a fucking moron, and then I'm going. You know what I mean?
I don't really use those kind of tactics.
I know you don't.
But
You're such a kind man.
I'm sure you got some friends that do. I'm
sure
yeah.
I got Matt Cash. You know Matt Cash, right?
Oh yeah, Matt Cash.
He'll call me and tell me I'm a moron for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matt's coming to retreat. Matt and Eric are coming to silent retreat this fall. That's amazing, they're gonna come out all enlightened.
Keeping Matt silent's gonna be a rough one. Dude. Do you guys supply duct tape, or how does that work? Because it's gonna be tough, dude. Yeah, yeah. Me and Matt are so similar, and so we're actually in Dad Brains together. The band, you know, the dad punk rock band we do.
I've got the record. I own the record.
Yeah, there you go, man. Yeah, I fucking just love that guy to death, man. But, and of all the people that needed to get sober, holy shit, dude. You know, he was insane, you know. And I'm so glad.
And it's one of those things, like, and he's doing it, right? And if he can, you know, we all can. It's not a lack of ability. It's just a willingness to say like, okay, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, I find that I'm bored. I'm bored by it. You know what I mean? I'm bored by getting drunk. I'm bored by, you know, partying. I'm bored by all these things now at this point in my life. You know what I mean? And I think it's out of boredom, accepting boredom, right? Maybe that's the fucking, now I'm at the point where I'm like, you know what? This has just got to change, you know, because you've run in these same circles over and over again. You just, hopefully you get bored of it, right? And then now you can move. But
you know, boredom is a real phenomenon on some level, but the more mindfulness we practice, the more interesting even the mundane shit becomes. The more we're present with what is happening as it's happening, there's less and less boredom, because it's like, well, this is kind of interesting, just watching my own mind, or just being present at my kid's soccer game, or, you know, just hanging out with my family on a Friday night. Like, I'm not bored because I'm present.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely, man. It makes sense, dude. I wanted to ask you about, you know, you obviously are such a happy dude, right? Like, and I know that you went through some crazy shit over the last few years. You kind of mentioned it. I don't really need to, it's not in my mind to talk about it, but I'm interested in how have you rebuilt yourself since this has happened? I mean, I know you lost a fucking lot, right? The departure with Spirit Rock, all these things, you know what I mean? How have you been able to stay positive, wade through this, and rebuild yourself? Or, I mean, obviously it's still a process, right?
Certainly still a process, and I don't really quite know how to answer it other than I just kept doing what I've been doing for the last 30 years, which is I meditate, I try to be of service to other people, I practice a lot of forgiveness towards the people that I, am resentful towards, that caused my community harm, my family, and myself. I made amends to all of the people that I felt that I had been unskillful towards, and took responsibility and said like, yeah, hey, I was unskillful in this way. And, so I just showed up and I did all the shit that I've been doing for the last 30 years. Right. And also like framed the whole thing as, we're talking about adventures and, like the silent retreats or the ice baths or whatever, of like, oh, this is an opportunity. This whole thing, this loss, this criticism, these false accusations, this is an opportunity for me to watch my own ego, get demolished, watch my own finances go away, and show up in a way that's like, oh, wow, I really want to be free. And this is an opportunity for freedom.
Yeah.
So, no special techniques, just the same shit that I've been teaching and doing for all these years.
Right. I mean, obviously, you had to experience a massive like ego death, right? I mean, through this whole process. Do you feel that there were times where your ego was just absolutely getting the best of you? Because I mean, we all deal with it, dude. I mean, when you're in a position of power, you know what I mean? Not that there was any real abuse of it, but it's hard not to be. I was a foreman for $60 million jobs. And it's a fucking lot of responsibility, dude. You know what I mean? Like, and there's no way to not have a bit of an ego about the things you are doing, what you're, you know what I mean, what you're accomplishing, all these things, you know what I mean? And it's got to be a bit of a fucking wild ride, right?
Well, part of absolutely a wild ride, and some, humbling for sure. I think in a healthy way, but also what I've watched a lot is my mind, the ego, become a martyr. If I had been really being, terribly unskillful in a lot of ways, then I think that maybe I would have felt more shame or, kind of demolishing. But because most of what happened was based on dishonesty and kind of other people's jealousy and greed and, kind of, false accusation. So then mostly my mind was just like martyr. Like, oh, this is happening, a little bit of that sort of victim of like, okay, this is happening. And then my Dharma practice saying like, okay, how do I work with the feelings of anger and the feelings of the ego wanting to take it and be a martyr about it? Right. This is happening to me. And like I said before, trying to reframe the whole thing is like, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for letting go, for practicing the non-attachment that I've been preaching, for practicing the boredom and the hunger and the loneliness. And, eventually sort of coming around to a place of, really getting to see who are my true friends and who is just hanging around in order to, get something. Right. And that as soon as I was no longer providing them with something, including my teachers, including the Spirit Rock, Cornfield, those people who I was the golden boy when I was bringing 300 people to their retreat center regularly.
Right.
But as soon as this accusation and the reputation, and they were like, oh, you're bad for business now. So we don't actually love you as a person. You were just a commodity. And now that you're not a good commodity for us, you're dismissed.
Right.
Which, what a blessing that is to see that, painful to see,
painful, but necessary, right? Yeah.
But also, quite, I feel like it's been a blessing, to kind of extricate myself from some of that.
Yeah. I mean, to shed the ones that, because the hard reality is a lot of this is business, right? I mean, a lot of the true, you know what I mean? And it's a fucking business, dude. And you're bringing bodies and they might be making donations or paying or however it works, you know what I mean? And someone's driving a fucking Tesla over there, you know what I mean? Like, for sure, you know what I mean? Or maybe a couple, you know what I mean? That's just exactly how it is. There's always a fucking boss, you know what I mean? And it's good to experience that. Have you changed up anything in your actual practice to take forward that you would like think maybe things that were different? Like, have you thought about any different ways that you're going to approach these things at this point? Like, as far as like your actual practice, you know what I mean?
Not really. My practice is pretty solid and continuous. And, my 5 precepts, in Buddhism, we practice, of avoiding killing, avoiding lying, stealing, avoiding all drugs and alcohol and sexual misconduct. And some of the scandal that happened around me was around my sexuality and around, a woman that I was dating. And, I definitely had to see that, like, I wasn't being as careful as I could have been.
Right.
And, so certainly it made me address that, I need to be much more cautious and much more aware of the sort of power dynamic that I'm holding as an author and a teacher and all of that stuff that I was sort of in denial about. I had that sort of 2 things going against me. One is I have this punk rock delusion of like, I'm just part of the scene. Like I just see myself as like peers with everybody rather than like I'm the boss and I'm the founder. And
Right.
that was a delusion. Like, I actually needed to take more responsibility for how I'm seen and projected on by others, and the
Right.
power that that gives me as a straight white male patriarchal,
Mm-hmm.
figure and all of that. So
Right.
that was a good wake up call for me. And the other thing is, like, in recovery, peer led, do it yourself. Like, I wasn't really seeing myself as a, the teacher. I was like, I'm just part of this recovery community. Like,
Right.
no, you wrote the book. You're not just part of this community.
Yeah.
You're the founder. And I was like, oh, I think I'm just a punk rock kid from Santa Cruz. They're
Right.
like, no, you're a 50-year-old man that has power over this whole community, and you need to be more careful with who you're sleeping with. I'm like,
100%.
oh,
Yeah.
100%. That is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. But it is,
100%.
when the way in which you maybe viewed it in the past, it does have to tie in with this punk rock guilt, right? Because if you admit to yourself, hey, this is my fucking ship, you know what I mean? It's like, sell out, like, you know what I mean? There's that voice in your brain going like, you ain't shit, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Well, and I think
hard,
it was a big part. I think it was a big part of what happened too, Craig, is that, coming from the punk scene, you get some success, you're a fucking target.
Totally, 100%, yeah.
And that,
And also, this is in the height of the cancel culture backlash, right? I mean, so everyone's fucking, I have many friends that have gone through things that you're just like, wow, like it would have not happened, you know what I mean? Like normally, so it's hard. I mean, how do you view cancel culture now? Obviously it's died down, but is it, when you see people that are screaming online about injustices while there's real, injustices about how someone reacted to someone's pronoun, right? When you know that there are real fucking injustices, kid in India digging through trash, to get food, like, how does your brain, do you view it as sad? Sadness? Like, are you like,
I'm all for holding people accountable. I'm all
100%?
for speaking truth to power. I'm all for all of us being more careful with our language and with how we, for traditionally oppressed, communities. I'm all for, and I celebrate the sort of awakening that is happening around gender, around sexuality, around race. Like, I think it's necessary. Critical race theory, like, this shit is necessary in our culture. So Me Too, necessary for sure. Like, this stuff needs to happen. It's important. I support it. I would consider myself a, radical sort of, leftist, feminist, ally. And part of what's not happening is compassion, forgiveness, reconciliation, actually listening, and giving people room, right, for conversation, and giving people room to take responsibility for their actions, rather than just, let's destroy people because they've been unskillful in the past, and let's dig up shit where people were unskillful 15 years ago and then destroy their, rather than like, hey, we found this thing from 15 years ago. Would you like to talk about that? Would you like to make amends for how unconscious you were 15 years ago, or whatever it was?
Oh, I know. It's
like that would be great. Like that kind of cultural sort of like, oh yeah, like, I was unskillful. I want to take responsibility. I was ignorant at that time. I was, so I'm a big, kind of fan and supporter of the radical shift that's happening in some ways. And like all changes, it goes a little bit too far, doesn't have the nuances, doesn't have the skillful reconciliation process that's necessary when we're going to call people out on bad behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've said it's a pendulum. It's a pendulum. It swings one way. In the 80s, it was fucking Christian white Republicans trying to get, all music banned that has cuss words, right? And now it's crazy because the left is, and I'm a general centrist. I'm embarrassed for everybody most of the time, right? I literally, like, you guys are everyone's embarrassing, like Biden, Trump, the whole, But it's one of the most wild fucking spectacles of a snake eating its own tail. You cannot be woke enough. You know what I mean? And when you talk about freedom of speech, you talk about all these things. You know, they don't realize that the shit that they're doing to people right now is very possibly going to happen to them in the future, right? I mean, it's just, and you wonder when's the correction going to be? And I think we're kind of heading out of it, right? People are like, okay, enough. Like you said, you know, any normal human in their right mind supports Me Too, supports critical race theory. You know what I mean? All these things, right? I think we're dealing with a dying culture of that old way of thought. My kids don't feel it. I don't feel it. It's generationally is going to be bred out. You know what I mean? But we have to speak up enough to where it's like, okay, guys, you guys are going a little far. Why don't you guys get out of college, get a job for a piece of shit boss that you hate, you know, try to figure out how to rip him off, you know what I mean? And then live in the world rather than this academic life that everything is only woke and that's it, you know what I mean? It's just such a wild, it's a fucked up experiment, man, you know what I mean? And I don't know where it ends, you know? I hope that it works all right. You know, I guess if we can all just, you know, have a conversation, it'd be great.
I mean, it's pretty human, you know, and it's kind of, yes, it's because of social media, it's getting so much attention these days. But this has always happened, you know, this sort of struggle between genders and races and accusations and, you know, who's the most righteous, you know, it's an ageless.
Right.
You know, when I had the girl that I was dating accused me of something non-consensual happening, and like shit fell apart around my community. You know, people pointed out to me, they're like, you know, the Buddha was accused of the same shit 2,600 years ago. People that wanted to destroy the Buddha were like, right. he's a sexist. He, you know, had sex with this woman, like called him a rapist, like all of this stuff. And it's just like, wow, like people have been doing this from the beginning of time in order to conform to each other.
Yeah, there's high speculation for Elizabeth Bathory, right? That she didn't do these things. She actually was a fucking massive landowner and about to be the richest woman in the world, and they released crazy information about her to fucking knock her down, to take all of everything she had. You know what I mean? And I've heard many. There's lots of scholars that say that like race conversation, or I'm sorry, gender conversation is one of the last major fights in the end of every major civilization in history. You know what I mean? It's like, oof, I don't know. We could be coming, man. I just got back from Yellowstone. If that volcano blows up, we're in trouble anyway. You know what I mean? It was a big perspective for me. I was like, ooh, you guys can argue about all you want, man, but I seen an actual volcano. If that thing goes, we're in big trouble. Maybe we should be thinking about that, you know?
Greg, I got to run soon. It was
I was just going to let you go, man.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you, dude.
My pleasure. Hope to see you.
All right, man. Talk to you.
When I'll get Dad Brains to come and play down in L. You guys got to, you know, do something at Against the Stream.
Let us know, man. We're down. You know, we're down.
I'll hit up Matt.
Yeah, hopefully I'll meet you in person sometime. Probably at the silent retreat. I'll be there. All right, brother.